Jonathan trenger knapt introduksjon, men jeg skal ta en liten likevel, for du har jo da, ikke bare er du sjefsdesigner og partner i Halogen, og du har også vært ansvarlig for mastergradsutdanningen på service design på AHO, men du har jo også vært stipendiat, og må gratulere deg med en doktorgrad fra desember.
Tusen takk.
På bruk av Design Labs. Så det, applaus for det. Og jeg tror det er en ganske fin overgang fra Hannes perspektiv på St. Olavs til å høre hvordan dere jobber med å legge til rette for tjenestedesign innenfor helsetjenesten. Så vær så god.
Tusen takk. Takk skal du ha. Bare lage en liten sånn skift av maskineriet her. Så se om teknikken med oss i dag. Ok, tusen takk for invitasjonen. Jeg skal snakke litt om hvordan tilrettelegge for samskaping av helsetjenester, but I will do it in English. So, I'm really happy to be invited here to share some insights that I have made during my PhD project that I defended on December last year at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design here, just by the river. My work has been concerned with how to facilitate for the co-creation of healthcare service, which is also the title of this short presentation. So, I'm going to start with a bit of a backdrop here. Our healthcare systems is a crucial societal infrastructure that has made great progress during the last 60 years or so. And, you know, healthcare institutions today have grown to become cities inside our cities, and with advanced equipment and highly competent personnel. However, these developments have also come with high investments that are continuously growing. So when you think about these things, or when you think about these enormous systems that we've created, this whole thing is all about facilitating close, intimate value exchanges that supports recovery and well-being. And patients today, they are different than they were before. They come in with information, with high expectations, even in times of crisis. And to meet these user expectations and needs, people centricity has become a main subject on the political agenda. So, patient centricity and other drivers, strong drivers of change, such as the unbalanced expenditures that we're witnessing, the growth of the elderly population, rapid technological developments, pushes our healthcare system to change. As illustrated in this figure, our healthcare systems are pressured to supply more viable healthcare services, as shown at the bottom here, while at the same time, they need to meet increasing user demands, as shown here at the top. Over the past 2 decades, there's been a rise in using service design within healthcare to support adaptations and innovations within the sector. And according to Service Design Network, with its global community, that monitors and develops service design practice and knowledge, service design counts for the largest volume of projects in the public sector. So healthcare service design actually is the largest amount of healthcare projects that are carried out. However, service designing in healthcare in this domain is really, really difficult because it is very, the system in itself is very hierarchic, it's super complex, and the collaboration across organizational divides are really hard to facilitate for. Also, there is quite large risk aversion and very costly infrastructures that makes all of these things extremely difficult to bring forward and develop new service initiatives. Responding to these challenges, healthcare service design is developing new ways of working within healthcare, I think. The integration of service design capacities into healthcare has primarily been done through the collaborations or through the commissioning of service design consultants and through research collaborations. This has proven to be quite effective and very good. However, it also has a lot of problems related to it. For instance, problems of maintaining, let's say, momentum towards the implementation phase of those processes. So lately, as we've just heard now, some of the healthcare institutions have gone into hiring in-house designers as an alternative model. And we see that developing more and more. We see that in-house competency is kind of popping up more and more in healthcare institutions, both here in Norway and also elsewhere. And also, there's been recently, there's been this growth of what we call service design labs, or design labs that are related to healthcare. And design labs are described as kind of safe spaces for collaborative experimentation, meaning co-creation, and demonstration of new solutions. One such example, or the example shown here, is taken from the Halogen Center that we also heard about a bit yesterday in a smaller meeting, which is a design lab that was established inside the St. Mary's Hospital in London in 2014. Another example is Experio Lab, a bit closer to here, that works with primary healthcare in the municipality level. That started in Karlstad in Sweden, and has now spread out to 8 different regions around the country. And because service designing inside labs is a relatively new phenomenon, there's currently limited in-depth knowledge on how service design is actually practiced inside those labs. And so, as a response to this, my PhD project sets to explore this currently evolving practice of healthcare service design that is carried out inside these embedded service design labs. So let me give you a bit of the context and some of the methodology and the interventions that I use as a basis for the findings that I'm going to talk about after that. So the context of my research is a partnership that was established between the Center for Connected Care, C3, at the Oslo University Hospital here in Oslo, and the Center for Design Research at the Oslo School of Architecture and Design. Now, C3 is a research-based innovation center with an 8-year commitment period supported by the Research Council of Norway, and since 2015, C3 works to bring different actors together from public healthcare, research institutions, and the medtech industry to jointly develop innovative healthcare services and conduct research. Now, 3 large hospitals are part of C3. And those hospitals, they provided the space or the basis for us bringing master students from the Oslo School of Architecture and Design into those hospitals to actually test out how it is to work within embedded design labs in those hospitals. So when you look at the methodology that I've been using, first, in order to do that, I had to go out and actually interview people who have already done that, so just to gain some experience of what is good, and I mean, what are good advices before you actually go out there. And then I've had the luck to conduct 4 different such interventions in 3 different hospitals during the last 6 years. So when you look at the embedded service design lab, the model was developed by me together with other people affiliated with the center. It kind of integrates a little bit as you showed just right now from the St. Olav's Hospital. It is kind of embedded inside a healthcare context that it seeks to change or help changing. So we imagine this design lab to be as close as possible to where the healthcare service is actually produced. And then it gathers different kinds of actors to it that engage in a community of practice that engages in action research, in a sense, and while they develop services. And the outcome of this is both new knowledge, which I'll try to share with you just soon, and also new services, new healthcare services. The process of each intervention looked more or less like this. First, we had a 3 to 6 month preparation for each embedded design lab. Then we have 5 different phases for each intervention. First, we embedded the lab, and then we did some field research. We had concept development, we developed the services themselves with some small trials, and then we had a handover phase so that the wards could actually further develop those services themselves. During this 5-stage process, 5 different workshops, co-design workshops were held, which gathered approximately 30 to 40 people, each of them, talking about what's the big picture, what do we see, ideate together, develop concepts, and so forth and so on. And then after that, there was a period of implementation of post-lab work that was maintained by the internal innovation champions at each hospital and the people working at the wards. And we held a formal evaluation of each process approximately 3 to 6 months after each one of them. So let me just briefly share the 4 different interventions that were carried out. Thank you, Anita. First one was carried out at the Ullevål Hospital, and here it was a test intervention. So it was connected to the establishment of C3, where we, at 2015, evaluated or discussed different kinds of scenarios of the future, of the patient of the future, in a sense, to understand better how different healthcare services could play out 10 years from that point. And we did all kinds of different scenarios that we enacted together, like spanning from genetic precision medicine to video-based care, and so forth and so on. Next intervention was held at Sunnaas at the Sunnaas Rehabilitation Hospital. Sunnaas was about to build a new hospital wing, and together with Sunnaas we discussed different ideas related to the rehabilitation hospital of the future, so that they could inform architects and planners on what kind of buildings and facilities they would need at Sunnaas. The third intervention was about establishing a center for elderly medicine at Ahus University, or Akershus University Hospital. Here we made services for supporting end of life, services of multidisciplinary outpatient clinics, and also hospital at home services for the elderly. And the final intervention was held here at Oslo University Hospital, which was entirely about hospital at home services, both for children or for children, and for people who need to go through a stem cell transplantation procedure. So, and each and every one of these interventions I can talk about like for 1.5 hours, so please bear with me, this is just a brief overview. Findings, so quickly going through the findings, there were 4 studies carried out as part of this project, or part of my PhD. One of them was about the tensions, the overall tensions that is faced by service designers working in healthcare. The other one was how designers shape and influence design conversations, how they facilitate fruitful interactions among actors, and the final one was how the embedded lab space was made use of. So let me quickly go through some of these findings. When it comes to the first study, we found out that there is always a tension of the position of the designers, being insider or outsider, or this constant tussle between should we apply an inside-out perspective or should we apply an outside-in perspective. So this tension of outside-in and inside-out is always present, and as designers you always come from the outside-in. And mitigating that tension is a central thing that designers tussle with. The other thing is the degree of change, incremental versus radical. Things that might seem as incremental for the designers might be super radical for people working inside the walls, and vice versa. So figuring out the balance between the radical and the implemental is always something that's a tension you need to work with. And sometimes radical, let's say, possibilities would actually acquire lots of incremental steps. So these things are really hard to really, it's not an either or in a sense. And the third thing is that we see that designers and these kinds of processes, they're very alert to the hierarchies that are manifested within healthcare. So designers work a lot with the top management. They pay attention to the top management, and they work together with the top management to make them secure to ask open questions and set high goals without actually prescribing what kind of solutions that would, be needed for reaching those goals and for answering those questions, because those things should become or grow bottom up. So there's an attention to the top and the bottom level, and the design processes tends to be kind of top-up dynamics, or they try to set top-up dynamics. So that's kind of on the macro perspective, the tensions that you need to anyway work with when you develop healthcare services this way. The second thing that we looked at was the conversations. There's loads of conversations going on when you work like this. All kinds of conversations. And designers, they influence the type of conversations, for instance, just by asking open questions. But they also influence the conversations by, for instance, using mediating artifacts, such as shown in this. So here you have like user journeys pasted on the wall, you have different service moments, you may have an implementation map on the table, and all of these things really help to scaffold conversations, basically, about how and what are we imagining together, how can we collaborate to make this thing happen. During those larger workshops and co-design events, we were kind of looking at the tools that designers were using to facilitate those events. And we figure out that there are 3 different dimensions that are used across those different workshops. We looked at 11 different workshops, analyzed like 75 different tools. And so we figure out that sharing perspectives is really a central thing that happens. So many tools are actually developed just in order for people to share the different perspectives. Many tools are made to actually generate experiences and share experiences around the practice, around what's going on. And then there are a lot of tools that are there to actually help people to become creative and to produce novel design material, actually. The final study was about looking at the embedded design lab spaces. So we see that there are 3 different spaces that are at play at once. First one is establishing and utilizing the physical space. So the physical space was used, as you see here, mainly to distribute cognitive load. So we used the space actually to put up a lot of different, and I think if you see like how people work on Miro, it's actually the same thing. So distributing cognitive load by using the space, and also as a meeting space, of course. That was the main finding there. But it's also constructing and cultivating a social space. So it's building a community of practice, making people own these processes, becoming part of that process. Something that has been invented here and there as very close to the wards has also been very important. And the third thing was framing and cultivating an imaginary space. So it's kind of what are the possibilities? How do we understand the problematics that may arise in these different areas? So to summarize, we navigate, when we work like this, we navigate between the inside and outside, between the incremental radical, the top and the bottom. We shape and influence design conversations on various levels. We facilitate experiences, exchanges of human perspectives, and the creation of new proposals. And we make use of the physical, social, and the imaginary lab spaces. Let me just wrap up here. So when you work with these embedded design labs, you get these three spaces that may help you to facilitate lots of conversations and workshops. And at the same time, they may help you to actually navigate those tensions that arise, the degree of change, the insider-outsider perspective, and the level of influence, and they're kind of tied together. So before the use of these embedded design labs, you gather, you frame, you define the aim and purposes. It's a process that involves staging for participation and embedding the design lab. Then you have the facilitated and mediated multi-actor conversations for learning and acting together. And at the end, the whole effort turns to spread the new mental models that have been created during that process and changing the institutional arrangements to deliver the services. So, thank you very much. I hope that this will inspire other institutions to use both healthcare service design and to work with embedded design labs. And here is, I have a link to the doctoral thesis, so if we provide we can share, you are welcome to look it up. Thank you very much.